Hello, my name is Skippy Mesereau, coach, former elected official, and lifetime public servant. Welcome to Healing Our Politics, the show that shows you, the heart-centered public servant and political leader, how to heal our politics by starting with the human in the mirror. It is my job to sit down or stand up with the best experts in all areas of human development, thought leaders, coaches, therapists, authors, scientists, and more, to take the best of what they have learned and translate it specifically for the public service experience, providing you actionable, practical, tactical tools that you can test out today in your life and with your teams. I will also talk to leaders across the globe with a self-care practice, getting to know them at a deeply human and personal level so that you can learn from their challenges and journey. Warning, this is a post-partisan space. Yes, I have a bias. You have a bias. We all have a bias. Everybody gets a bias. And I will be stripping out all of the unconscious cues of bias from this space. No politics, partisanship, or policy here. Because well-being belongs to all of us. And we will all be better served if every human in leadership, regardless of party, ideology, race, or geography, are happier, healthier, and more connected. This show is about resourcing you, the human doing leadership, and trusting you to make up your own damn mind about what to do with it and what's best for your community. So, as always, with love, here we go. Welcome to the Healing Our Politics podcast, the show that shows you, the heart-centered leader, how to heal our politics by starting with the human in the mirror. And in this episode, I have a very, very special human for you as I sit down with public servant Shakeyla Ingram. Shakeyla served on city council in her hometown of Fayetteville, North Carolina, where she focused on issues of community empowerment, small business support, and housing, always bringing her signature positive energy, can-do spirit to the table. But the truth is, it was not all roses. Shakeyla was diagnosed with bipolar disorder while in office and faced significant challenges as she found herself embroiled in the middle of factional community anger during the COVID-19 epidemic and immersed in dysfunctional behavior between council members and herself. Since losing her last race, yes, she lost hers too, Shakeyla has really gone gangbusters. She released a book, Intentionality Here. She launched Haus Host, her consulting firm. She is hosting a podcast called The Key to the City. She released Provisions Bootcamp, an entrepreneur's toolkit, and started a newsletter called Intentional Impact. Woo! That is a lot. And in this episode, we dig into the real folks, tracing Shakeyla's life from day one to now. We talk about the importance of grandparents, family, role models, and friends on who we become in life and leadership, how early childhood experiences and trauma manifest later in life, unconscious patterning, what it is, how to understand yours, and how to use that knowledge to grow and expand in your leadership. We talk about coming out bipolar on council, inter-council conflict, I guess I'm having some with my voice, and the impact of public hate, being stuck in the middle of community factions and its effect on our well-being and performance as leaders. Shakeyla shares some of her greatest learnings from this journey, including techniques to identify and work with triggers, practices to exhume yourself from depression, creating goal friends and journey agreements, the distinction between trauma and healing as she understands it, what intentionality is and how to use it for your success, and so much more. With a warm heart and a deep sense of connection, I share this meaningful, connective, and real conversation with Shakeyla Ingram. Shakeyla, it's truly such an honor to be here with you this morning on the Healing Our Politics podcast, the show that shows you, the heart-centered leader, how to heal our politics by starting with the human in the mirror, something that you know and do intimately.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. And what's so interesting, I'm getting teary eyed already, the heart centered leader. And was so about a month and a half ago, I had a friend stop being a friend to me. And they said that I was childish in my leadership when I was on council because I led with my heart. And so for you to say the heart centered leader, because in my mind, I was like, there's got to be space for the heart in politics. There has to be space for it. If not, you lose sight of what's important. Thank you for that.
And you lose the ability to come together with others, which is the only way we ever truly accomplish anything meaningful that sticks. So if there's someone watching this video right now, I'm making some assumptions. So feel free to, throughout this, feel free to correct my assumptions, correct the record, educate me, whatever's necessary. But I imagine there are people who, if they're watching clips of this right now, would make the assumption that we don't have that much in common. I'm a, white, cisgendered male from a large northern city who lives in a mountain town and goes skiing. And you are a beautiful African-American woman from North Carolina. And there may be assumptions that we don't share much. But what I loved about getting ready for this episode is how much we actually have in common in our experiences, in our work, in what we care about. And I thought it would be fun to start with your journey, and your grandparents are a really critical part of your journey. They're a huge part of my journey. And we both have an Arthur in our grandparent tree. And I thought we could maybe just start, my grandfather, who's really my role model, the one person in my family who just continues to posthumously inspire me every day, who I wear in ink on my body. I thought we'd start with some grandparents. Can you tell us a little bit about yours and your relationship?
Absolutely. So I grew up in my grandparents' barber shop, and that taught me the essence of community. Everybody goes to the barber shop. Everybody goes to a barbershop. The judges that are judges today, they were starting out as attorneys, like reading books to me and my playpen at the barbershop. And I can say, right. And so what's funny is my grandparents were night and day, so far different from each other. And so my grandfather, his clientele base were like the police chiefs, the judges, and the mayors. And my grandmother, her clientele was like the street guys and the ones that are, what most would say running from the police and whatever. And when you have those two as grandparents and the personality that they had, my grandfather was very quiet, very to himself. He didn't say much, but when he spoke, right?
When Granddaddy spoke, Granddaddy spoke.
Yeah. And so if it was Shakeyla cut the front yard, Kiki cut the backyard, that was it. My grandmother, Gloria, she was this small little thing and just feisty, fierce, old. Will cuss you out in a second and will still do for you. And will still do for you. She gave a lot of jobs to a lot of guys who were like just, getting out of prison and whatnot. And so my grandfather didn't really like that. She believed in the second chance for people. I know that there were some homeless individuals that, how they get SSI, Social Security income. She would help them monitor their spending because if somebody knows you're getting a check, you can easily get jumped. And so she would help them monitor it. You got your toiletries for the week. You got this, but don't get on her bad side.
So there's a slightly different universe, but very similar theme. So my grandfather grew up in Southern Illinois, rural town, only Jewish family. One of many brothers, as was the case back then, only one that comes up north to Chicago, to the big city, wants to be a doctor, which was something, I mean, like when you think about the history of racism, anti-Semitism, had to legally change his name so that when they viewed the application, they didn't turn it down for a Jewish name. Something we wouldn't think of today, but still happens to a lot of people with traditionally Black names today. And he gets to go to med school because my grandmother works the switchboards and pays for him to go. But then once he has that position and he's able to start making some money, she goes back to school and gets a graduate degree in economics, and she handles all the finances, right? And it's just what I'm hearing is sort of a similar thing where Arthur had to, because he was male at the time, start the business, but then grandma's coming in, Gloria's coming in with the fire to really make it work.
And so it was, and then the going joke in the community was, she's a better barber than him. which actually was kind of true, she was the teaching barber in the barbershop. So she would take in women barbers, and I mean, she would even move them into the house. And I'd be like, why are they here? And she's like, no, I'm helping them. They need to learn, and they don't have anywhere else to go. And they're going to be barbers. They're going to go out and do great things. And so that pair truly helped me understand the essence of community.
What was the meaning that you made in your own life from watching her give and serve others in that way? What was your takeaway without having to be right or wrong? What did you make that mean for you?
Give love no matter what. Give love, give care no matter what. Understanding that not everyone always has what I may have. And I may not have what they have. It can easily switch. And understanding, being able to listen, but most importantly, give love.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious. This is certainly the case for me. It's not the case for everyone, but it does tend to be the case that when young children have very strong bonds with grandparents, that comes paired with less strong bonds with parents. And I wonder what your relationship was like with your parents. And I'm happy to share my experience too.
Yeah. So, very close with my mom in a sense of a friendship, and still like mom. My dad, that one's a little interesting. It's a little interesting. It's more obligation. And he's very present in my life, but more in the obligation way. And so it's like a box checker. But now I'm learning to, like, I had to go through some healing. I had to, like, okay, say, if I want this relationship to be this with my dad, then I need to insert the effort. So I'll call and say, hey, you want to go for a walk with me somewhere? Or do you want to go grab something to eat? And just try to spend that time with my dad.
So I grew up in a divorced household, very messy, very long. So I had a good relationship with my dad growing up, but limited time. I've never lived with him. And later in life, he chose to divorce me effectively. So didn't talk to him for, I may be getting this wrong, but I'm going to say 7 years, something like that. And I'm also in that process now, not being on the other side, but in a more evolved place of understanding of where he came from and how I contributed to that. I've been trying to engage in some of that healing. And so I've been reaching out once a quarter, just opening the door, and he's not been interested or willing at this point. He's expressed long-term interest, but not immediate interest. And so I kind of relate to that. Are your parents still together?
God, no. And no. Oh, no. But
tell me about that.
Funny enough. And this is why I say God, no. I couldn't stomach it because I'm an Aries. My mom is a Sagittarius. My dad is a Leo. We're all fire signs.
I'm glad you
every
explained
single
that to me,
one.
I was like, oh, it's out of my depth.
Yeah, we're every single one. So no, but I think what happens when people transition in family. things happen. And so there was a lot that happened once my grandfather transitioned. My grandmother transitioned first and then my grandfather. And that, I think that was like the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of their relationship.
Would you be willing to share from the little girl, like what that felt like at the time?
Yeah, confused, at fault, sad, frustrated, very upset with myself, maybe upset with them, my parent. Yeah, I think that's what I felt.
I'm going to ask a question that might make no sense and go nowhere. And if so, that's totally okay. But I wonder if any instance, any situation with grown Shakeyla on the Lafayette Council where a similar dynamic is at play, and just sitting with this and seeing if any memory pops up, whether it makes sense or not. Is there anything that this reminds you of in your later life?
Yeah, I think when I was on the Fayetteville City Council, I felt most unprotected as a young Black woman. And I think I felt that mostly because any and everything that I was experiencing was coming from Black men on the council. I did not know how to handle that. In my perspective or in my experience, I didn't have to deal with that with the men in my family.
Yeah.
And I could say that the Black women that I served with, they were there in support, kind of like how my mom was. There was an instance when we were in a closed session, we were discussing something, and they were trying to do something that was, to me, it just wasn't ethical. You could really tell that everybody had a role to play. Everybody knew what their role was. And I said, from my understanding, there was a discussion about this already. And I think what is best is for us to go ahead and make the vote because you already know you have the votes. When I tell you chaos ensued, all the Black men, one stood like, raised himself up, forced himself up from the dais. I'm sick of her always talking about there's a meeting. I mean, yelling. I'm sick of her always talking about there's a meeting before the meeting. Also, he's walking my direction. Another in the same breath, another Black male yelling at me over his dais and like pointing, "You're wrong, you're wrong." And the only white lady on the board, she had to stand up and she had to get in front of him and say, "Stop, calm down, sit down." And I was so confused. And then you know how you get gaslit into thinking like you're the one that did something wrong. I was like, dang, did that? Okay, maybe there was not a meeting before the meeting. And then it took two women to say, y'all owe her an apology because that's what happens. We have these conversations before a meeting. And the one that stood up and said, hey, sit down, she says, you know what, Shakeyla, you are right. We did discuss this. We did have a meeting before the meeting. And now I'm sitting here about to cry because that just happened to me. They didn't apologize, but they said I was wrong. And what got them to truly calm down was the one council member that was sitting between them. She was like, hey, stop. Y'all are pastors.
Mm-hmm.
And they was like, oh, I'm so sorry. We just get so passionate. But when I get passionate, it's a problem.
I think this story is so important. It illustrates something that so many of us, myself previously, just don't understand, which is childhood patterns, childhood lessons, childhood experiences show up in leadership unless we actively do the work to understand and process and release them. That could show up in this instance, and I'm not making any claims about what happened. I was not there, but just with a coach's hat on, there's a situation in which grown Shakeyla, if I can call her that, in that instance, seeing that experience that she remembers, even if it's not a cognitive memory, it's an embodied memory from 5 of this really big experience in her life, becomes little Shakeyla, whether she knows it or not, and is no longer responding to what's happening in the room, but is responding to the experience she had when she was 5. Right? It's a transference response. Alternatively, and maybe both, and most likely both, the men in the room, having shared some similar experience growing up in a similar community at a similar time with your father in a similar culture, etc., are responding from their trauma, whatever that is. And they're getting big and aggressive because somewhere deep down, the little one in themselves is scared. And when we don't understand that, when we don't bring it into the light, when we don't process it, then it repeats and it shows up in real ways that keep communities from moving forward. And it's just, that's why it's so important that leaders take on the responsibility to do their job best by showing up fully and addressing that stuff that's hiding in their inside.
That's major. That's major. And I think the question that I'm always asking is, what will it take? What will it take? And I can't seem to find an answer, but for everyone to realize that if we're not operating in this mindset, we're a part of the problem, and we need to figure out how we can be the solution. But I think even in that, people feel like, oh, if I do this, or if I'm operating in that way of what I experienced, that is the solution. We got to make her feel that she's wrong, and so she's not just going to walk in here and try to reprimand us, so that everybody else that comes behind can get the same understanding.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I was listening to a speaker, Indian woman, the other day, speaking to some giant conference of people. And what she said is, when challenging, I'm going to call it challenging energy, comes in towards us, when someone screams at us or projects at us, whatever that is, we have 3 options. We can reflect it, which is we can take it and throw it right back at them.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck you, you're wrong, right? You're the problem.
Mm-hmm.
You're the problem. We can absorb it, shut down, take it in. It dies there, but a little part of us dies with it. Or we can transform it. We can take it in, apply the work ourselves, and invite someone else to do the same through our example. And I wonder, even if it wasn't immediate, or and probably wasn't immediately in that meeting or even immediately following it, but in the time that has since passed between then and now, in what way, knowing you, I'm making an assumption, in what way have you transformed it?
The relationship?
The experience from that council meeting, how have you turned that into a teacher in some way that opens the possibility for others to do the same?
Encouraging them to show up no matter what.
Mm.
I from that instance, well, not necessarily from that instance. I think a year had gone by, and it was just like war. It was war. And I tried to sit down with them, and I said, hey, this is what's going on, so on. Can we? And there was some resolve, but not from everybody.
Yeah.
And so what I learned was, okay, I'm going to have to lead in this mindset. I'm going to have to, and it hurt me more than anything. And so what I have been attempting to express to others that may come from me, and just to discuss like conflict resolution, because that's essentially what it was, conflict resolution.
Mm.
I go back to the foundation of why you're here in the first place. And I think the only thing that I have chosen to taught is that you must show up in a way that suits your leader persona, but also your inner you. At that time, I was only showing up in my leader persona, not thinking about the effects of
Yes.
my inner me.
Funny. I had a similar experience. It's actually very funny. It's so similar in the childhood patterning that led to the response and the outcome and how I worked it. Different set of characters, but we were working on a very large affordable housing project. And there was an effort to go out to the community to get feedback. And I was fairly early in my career. I was entirely using your language in my leader persona. I didn't really know anything else yet at the time. I hadn't learned how to have enough confidence in my inner direction to be willing to do that. I was still scared of what other would say or how I'd be perceived or would I do the right thing. So I was in the leader persona, and the leader persona is a forcing persona. It's a you will do this, I will make this happen. It can be a manipulative persona,
Yeah.
and it's an isolated persona. And so I went to my supporters, to the community members who wanted to see that housing happened. And we created a strategy for how people would respond to the survey to receive the most housing, the most density on the lot. And I genuinely thought I had done my job at that point. I'm in leader persona. Great. I'm demonstrating the need and we go forward, right? Look at me. I'm so good at doing that. I'm the hero of the journey. And we got to the meeting and I got screamed at also by a standing councilwoman who was in her, I hope I don't get this wrong. I'm going to say 60, but a mature, powerful woman who I have a ton of respect for. And her screaming was that I was going around their backs, that I was colluding the process, that I was forcing something, that I was being selfish and self-interested. And it triggered for me all those same feelings because I had that angry, and if I'm being totally honest, like larger, older woman, like that was the archetype, right? That was the visual that cued me from childhood. And so I totally went into the defense pattern as well, got angry, then shut down, ended up being on like the third page of the major state paper with photo, the whole thing. And I think it was like councilwoman gives councilman tongue lashing, some, ridiculous headline. And it was hard to process that in the moment. I didn't get it. But as I was able to reflect on that and bring my, I don't remember the word you use, but my internal leadership, my internal locus, my heart centered leader to it, I could ask the tough questions of, was any part of what she was saying right? Is that what triggered me? And it took a long time, but from that place, I was able to recognize there was some truth in what she was saying.
Mm.
And it was really a catalyst for me to make amends, to ask questions about how I could lead differently from the heart, where instead of making a plan of what I wanted to get done and then trying to force it, going out to others and asking, what's really important to you? And not fawning or placating, but just looking for the 5%, 30% of things where that totally agreed with what I wanted to do and what I thought was right. And then being able to focus on those things, support them, celebrate them for those things. And people like that, right? It feels good. And it took a lot of time to rebuild trust. But as a result of many things, but amongst them, the learnings that I took from that, not making it about her and blaming her, but the learnings that I took, even though I wasn't the only one who contributed, far from it,
Right.
which she later came to share as well and apologize for, which I appreciated. It ended up that project added a lot of density. And it was a huge learning experience for me, but I think really mirrors what you're talking about and the healing that's possible in the container and the recognition that Public service and romantic relationships are probably the two things in this world that apply the most pressure to whatever your pre-existing trauma patterns are in a wildly public way. And
Yes, it
that is
does.
horrifying and scary and fearful, but it is the best fucking highlighter in the world for your shit.
It is.
It will show you exactly what you have to work on if you choose to let it. And it's really a gift in that way.
That's very true. That's very true. There's something that you highlighted. You said trust. And so one of the things that I always found hard to do was trust in politics. I would be in a meeting and we would all come to a consensus. And then we all leave the meeting and now it's 5 people trying to plot against what we all said because it seems to serve, this greater good. And it's like, how can I trust you? I had a vote one time and it was for my community and it was for what I was fighting for. Council members hijacked it, went and had a meeting without me about what I had been fighting for. And they came out with the lesser option of what I had been fighting for. And I didn't vote for it. But because I had relationships with our state senators, I was able to get a full build out of what I was wanting and not just what I was wanting. Let me be clear. It was what the community was wanting and had been begging for over 30 years. And so I never could find space to trust. And so when I lost my election, and though I was like, of course, hoping I was win, but at the same time, I think a part of me didn't care to really win. I think I was just still hurt that it was because a friend ran against me. But so when I lost, I was like, all right, cool. Because my heart could not take anymore trying to go against my ethics, trying to go against what my heart is saying. And I just didn't think it was fair to my inner self. It was cool for my leadership persona because homegirl likes to throw down, but it just wasn't cool for the inner me.
Yeah. And from reading your book, it sounds like we share an internal duality of part of our persona being very, I don't want to say fight oriented, but challenge oriented. We like to break norms and conventions. We look for the unconventional. That's very much part of our makeup, standing up to power, standing up for the little person. That's hardwired in us. But there's also a part of us that really desires to be of community, included, wanted, desired, welcomed, safe. And those two internal parts can be intentioned. Is that with each other? Does that land for you in any way?
That does. Absolutely.
I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of patterns, but there's like patterns and then there's values. And these are things that we learn as little ones. Values are the thing that guide us, that when we're in our most heart-centered, aligned, safe place, psychologically safe place, that really lead us and that mean the most to us. Patterns are the unconscious behaviors that we learned either from mimicking what parents did or in opposition to them. The actions themselves don't need to be bad or good. What makes them patterns is that they're like an unconscious response. So it could be something like perfectionism, right? I learned to receive love or acceptance from my parents. I have to be perfect. Could be something like a freeze response. Like when I get yelled at, I just totally shut down. That's how I stay safe.
Same.
Can you identify like both the values that you think you carried forward from your youth, as well as some of the patterns that have been hardest for you to work with?
Giving love when it's not given back. Not being able to or being forced to go against what I believe ethically. And I think that comes from watching or seeing failed relationships, those back and forth failed relationships. And it's a pattern that has played out where, oh, I care. I care. And so, for instance, a councilwoman, she said, why do you continue to give the mayor a chance? And every time throws you out to dry. And just in my heart, I'm like, I just believe in second chances for people. I just believe he'll get it right. And never happens. So I think those are some of the ways, some of the values and patterns. And I can say that I do battle with like bipolar depression. And so being able to know that I have that bright spirit and that high energy, it does make it a somewhat easier for me on my lower days to just, either I meditate, pray about it, and like get up and fight. But I think for me, like love and ethics are just what I've carried through my life.
I picked up on something you were saying there in relationship to your bipolar diagnosis, which I know happened after you left office, as it normally does for people. It's later in life.
That was while I
But I
was in
think what I heard you
office.
say,
It was while I was
oh, it
in.
was while you were in
Yep. Sorry to
office.
interrupt, but yep, it was while I was in office.
Did that? No, I think that's a good record. Correct. Did you share that with anyone at the time?
Yeah, I shared it with like, and I guess in politics you call it your kitchen cabinets. I shared it
Yeah.
with them, so it was like 5 people, and then I shared it with two of the women on my board, so they knew.
How was
And
that received?
yeah, so that's the thing. So my parents knew, and oh, where's my tissue? Um, you
Take as
know,
much time as you need.
it was a positive response. And I remember one that sticks well with me was, it's okay to know how your mind and emotions work. And I think
Yeah.
what happens is when you get a response like that, you don't realize that, oh, okay, there's really nothing wrong with me. I just operate differently. What you hear a lot of times is, oh, this bipolar depression, they're crazy, they're this and whatnot. And so every single person that I told that was not a family member had nothing but a positive response. If I would call them, and of course, like I'm big on making somebody your person. If I would call them and express, hey, I'm feeling this way, I can guarantee that I'm getting calls throughout the day, or texts, hey, you want to go out to lunch or something like that, which was, I just didn't expect that. I didn't. I be honest, I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect a positive response.
That's beautiful. I'm happy to hear that. But for someone who does think, oh, bipolar people are crazy, to use your words, what's actually true? Like, what does it actually mean? What is the experience of being bipolar for you?
hmm So, so what's funny is my psychiatrist, because and I kept saying it. I said, "Oh my God, I'm bipolar," and I'm bipolar. She was like, "No, you're not." She said, "You just have a high and low range of which your emotions will operate, and most
Sure.
times they are triggered by certain experiences." And I said, "Okay." And so we laid out my experiences, and we began to figure out what those triggers were. And so um I just get real sad, sometimes I just get real sad, and I just don't want to talk to anybody. It does not mean that, there's significantly something wrong with you. It honestly truly means is that like your emotions are a bit more sensitive.
What are some of the other techniques that you proactively have found to work to mediate or mitigate the depressive side of symptoms? What I heard there is nature exposure, like being outside. I heard exercise, physical activity, and I
Mhm.
heard travel. And you talk about how you're wrapping that in. What are some of the other things you found? And being a highly scheduled, I don't like the word busy, highly scheduled because it's a choice person. How do you ensure that you're able to do those things?
I put everything on my calendar. Time block. A time block.
Yeah.
Also, I struggle to get out of the bed in the mornings, not because like that's a like a bipolar depression thing, but because I like working from the bed. I have a
Mm.
whole desk situation where I will just prop up, but also it's not healthy for me to do that. If I get a phone call at the start of my day, also I try not to be on my phone for at least an hour after I wake up because I'm probably going to stick around in bed for about 30 minutes to 45 minutes after I wake up. And so if I get a
Mm.
call that's just going to trigger me, that means I'm going to be in bed for the rest of the day. And I don't want that. I like to FaceTime. I love to FaceTime my friends and like be nosy and see what they're doing. They don't know that that is a way for me to like kind of keep my scenery changing. Well, they'll
Mm.
know when this airs, but they don't know that that's a way that I like,
Surprise!
right, that I'm like, but I
You're
love
my
that
you're
also.
my service dog.
Right. Right. But they're all like, but I also love checking up on my friends. I love to talk to my friends. I like to see my friends. Like if I'm friends with somebody,
Mm.
like I like them. I love them. I want to see them. And so that is a way. I'm a nosy neighbor. And so a lot of my work is done at home. And so I'll take my little 15-minute breaks and I'll go outside and be nosy and see what the neighbors are doing. Like as we get older, we have to find new things that bring us joy. For me, I have to
Mm.
find new things to try and like keep me up to speed with being proactive.
Just at the risk of being redundant, because I think it's such great advice. So one, you have a practice of noticing when a depression is coming on. Two, you have environmental cues that make it more likely that a depression is coming on. For instance, the seasons change, shorter days. And I will tell you, I'm in a men's group. There are 6 of us. None of us that I'm aware of have this diagnosis. All of us come December are talking about how we're feeling down. So this is just an amplification of a normal trend. These interventions really work for anyone. You don't have to have a diagnosis of any kind to have these things be effective. So you're using these tools for recognition of the pattern. And then the interventions include being outside more, exercising more. I can't highlight that one enough. If there was one thing if I had to drop everything but one thing, exercise, 100% leading indicator. Travel, so being in new places, which also relates to novelty seeking, which you said, trying new things. Makes sense. You're getting the brain out of its old habits, out of its ridges, and into new behaviors. Social ability, FaceTiming friends, seeing the actual face, being curious about their experience, getting out of your experience and into their experience. And then limiting electronics. I do the same thing. No electronics first hour in the morning, life changing,
Mm-hmm.
truly life changing. So those are 6 significant bullets and intervention points. And to make those happen within the scope of a highly scheduled day, calendar what you care about, folks. Put it in there. And once it's in there, that's it. It's immutable. And you can plan ahead. I want to go back to something you said. I think this is actually fascinating and might be a process that others can follow as well. You talked about working with, I think, your psychiatrist when you were questioning whether you had bipolar to identify your triggers. Can you walk us through what that process looked like at a very tactical, specific level so that someone else could identify their own triggers? And if you're willing to share what you identified, just so it illustrates what's possible for folks, I think that would be really helpful because some people might not even know
Mm-hmm.
what a trigger is or what they're looking for.
Yeah. So for instance, I'll use one because I think I'm experiencing this right now, which is endings. I don't do well with endings. So after my grandfather
Mm.
passed away, I went through a really bad depression. When I lost a friend some years ago, I went through a really bad depression. And so now, like 2 days ago, I was like really sad and crying because I was like, I think I'm losing a friend. And
Mm.
so what we did is we started with things that I already know about me. I'm not good with endings. I hate endings. So we started with that. And she just said, all right, let's go to childhood. Talk to me about it. What are some instances where you felt this and then it made you feel this way? And we
Mm.
started walking through that. And then um, I think another piece for me is like not feeling adequate or loved or wanted. That's a trigger for me. But I've been able to work through that. I think that a lot of that has to do with self-care, self-love, self-confidence, and truly
Yes.
needing to love yourself first.
As you're going through the process of identifying triggers, from my experience, two things can happen, and I'm curious how you dealt with these in the sessions. The first is, let's call them false positives. So there was something that was challenging that you have a memory of, but is just a normal response to a challenging condition that didn't leave a pattern or a trigger. How did you, when you arrived at and named and gave voice to something that happened, how did you identify if this is truly a trigger versus just a normal response that didn't stick with you into adulthood?
When I no longer had a emotional response to it.
What was the practice of sitting with the thing that you pulled up then?
Meditation.
Hmm.
Meditation and journaling. Um, there was a time in my life when I lived in Georgia, I was very isolated from Fayetteville, North Carolina. Very isolated. And so I could pick and choose what I was able to care about. And so that could have been
Hmm.
my family. That could have, I was only
Yeah.
concerned about what was like in my immediate circle, which was in Georgia. And I did not allow it to cause me any type of emotional stress, because that is like the base of, bipolar depression, being triggered emotionally, you know?
Hmm.
And so I think for me, that was it.
Hmm. Yeah. So as these things come up, you name them,
Hmm.
you're then sitting with them in your own mind in silence. You're maybe processing on the page what happened and following that practice. If a charge remains strong, you're labeling that as a trigger. And if it dissipates, then you're recognizing, okay, that was just a challenging experience. And that's sort of how that differentiation happened.
Yeah. Yes.
Hmm.
Hmm.
That makes sense to
Hmm.
me.
Yeah.
That
And,
makes sense to
and
me.
the weird part, a lot of it is talking to yourself about it. Because if you're
Yeah.
not being honest with yourself, you can't walk into a doctor's office and be honest with them. And a lot of that work is done on your own, is done with you.
We can only work with what is. And I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Byron Katie, but it filters into my coaching work a lot and our coaching work at ELC a lot, which is anytime you're fighting with reality, you lose. We have to be willing to open eyed, in bravery, meet what really is, however challenging, however shameful. And shame is something you can process. Because it just is. Shame is a story we put on top of it that doesn't need to be there, but we often feel it. And it's an impediment to being with it. So now you have identified these things. Did you find it was important for you to do this with someone, a psychotherapist, a coach, a friend? Is this work that you could have done on your own once you understood how it worked? What's your relationship to the supported and or solo nature of this work?
Well, I did it with a plan in mind. Um, One, to do the work on my own, because I knew the person that I wanted to be. I knew the woman, like that was the thing. When I went through like the, the severe depression, which got me back to Fayetteville, and
Mm,
what was so crazy was I ended up running for like council like a few months later. I knew what that woman looked like on the other side. I just had to figure out how to
mm,
get there. And
mm,
so I was just like, all right, cool. So I got myself through it. And at that time, I didn't have the diagnosis. I didn't have the diagnosis.
right.
I had a therapist, and then I stopped going to therapy because I did the work.
Mm,
And I ran for council. I won. And then like a year later, I was like back at ground zero because I got elected in December 2019. My grandmother had passed away July 2018. So that was from I decided to run for office in November of 2018. So all of 2019 was the first 6 months was still grieving and deciding to run and preparing to run. And then to get elected, sworn in December 2019. And then March, COVID, stuck in the house. I can't be active. I can't do anything. 3 months more after that, social unrest.
Yeah.
And so now I'm like, I'm melting on the inside. I'm melting. I don't have anything together, but I have to put it together. I have to make it look like it's together.
And now a quick break from our sponsors, and we'll be right back to the show. This episode is supported by Elected Leaders Collective Foundation donor Moon Song Fund. Thank you. Without you, this show would not be possible, and express the deepest gratitude for your giving. And if you out there want to see more of this content, you too can give like the Moon Song Fund by going to electedleaderscollective.com, clicking the donate button, and receiving your tax benefit. The Healing Our Politics podcast is brought to you by the Elected Leaders Collective, the first leading and most highly recognized name in mental health, well-being, and performance coaching for elected leaders and public servants, designed specifically for you. Now, don't be fooled by the name. The Elected Leaders Collective is not just for elected leaders. It is for all public servants, staffers, volunteers, government, nonprofit, whole organizations. This is for you. If you are filled with passion for improving your community and world, but are tired, as I am, of the anger, stress, and vitriol, if you find yourself banging your head against that same wall, struggling with the incoming criticism and threats, arguing with colleagues who are supposed to be on your team, and questioning if it's even worth it anymore, then the Elected Leaders Collective programming is specifically for you. With the Elected Leaders Collective, you will learn to become a hashtag political healer, building the authentic, unshakable confidence and courage to stay true to yourself through the anger and pressure, while cultivating the open, empathetic mind to meet others with the curiosity, compassion, and kindness necessary to respond to threats, improve challenging relationships, de-escalate conflict, and bring people in your community together to solve real problems and get shit done. You'll reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm, and become a more effective leader while having time for your family, yourself, your health, and your wealth, sleeping well at night, and showing others they can too. Now that's leadership. Healing Our Politics listeners receive 10% off all Elected Leaders Collective services using the code hashtag political healer. Use it today and become one of the brave political leaders healing our politics. Use code hashtag political healer by going to www.electedleaderscollective.com and starting today. That's www.electedleaderscollective.com and starting today. Yeah, I mean, the conditions at the time preclude so many of your go-to mitigation techniques. Yeah. You can't go outside, you can't exercise, you can't travel, you can FaceTime, but you can't see friends in person. That's really tough. And I'm sure if your experience was anything like mine, being in elected office during COVID, the idea of I won't use electronics for the first hour is a joke.
A whole joke.
Like, you got responsibilities that is life and death that you are using that device.
Yeah, Skippy, listen. So before COVID, my foot was to pavement by 4:30 a.m. running. Ooh. Minimum of 5 miles, probably will get 7. Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
That's wild.
13 miles on Saturday. That was my life. COVID hit. I stopped doing yoga, and I was a yoga guru. Like it would piss off my council for me to post pictures of me doing yoga. Piss them off.
Some projection.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And so I lost all of that. And then my district is taking the greatest hit. The market house is on fire. And you have, and now we're dealing with race now. I got some tall white man sitting here telling me this, pointing in my face, this is all your fault. We got to protest now. We got to be outside. So at no point, I think I was an autopilot.
Yeah.
It was just doing.
Yeah. And when you apply the work, right, the internal work, part of what you learn sticks with you, whether those are techniques or observational understanding. And you have to keep doing the work.
Yep.
I think of like cleanliness, right? Like you can't shower once and then expect that to work forever. Or if you think about a sports analogy, you could learn how to catch a football, how to make a jump cut, etc. And you will still know how to do those things if you stop playing. But if you go out and you haven't played for 2 years, you're not going to do it very well. And so you really do have to establish a regular daily practice, especially when things go awry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. And so for me, it was so much happening at once. It was so much.
Yeah. What would have been the 3 things that were hardest that you kind of knew going in would be something you'd had to deal with, but you didn't realize maybe to what degree or in what way it would be challenging for you?
Dealing with the elected officials that I had looked up to and did community activations with. So some of them were still on the board. And so I'm thinking, oh, I got partnerships in here. I can be collaborative with these individuals. Nope. That's the main thing. I mean, I led community healing events with them, with some of them. I've sat on panels with some of them, like in my early 20s. And so, and what's funny is one elected official, he never really gave me any trouble. He's been there so long. He used to campaign in my grandparents' barbershop.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so he came in with welcoming arms. But the others, it was hard. And I did not expect that. When I was still living in Atlanta, there were some things that the mayor was experiencing. Well, this was him running for mayor the first time. And so from Atlanta, I started making calls trying to, get him elected. And one of my biggest things when I left Atlanta was I'm going to go help the mayor. That didn't pan out. So yeah, I think that was it. Serving with the people that I looked up to.
In your later years in office or following the loss and being out of office, can you just sketch for us sort of what the process has looked like of reclaiming and reinvesting in the inner work, the self work?
Yeah, so I'm still going through it, Skippy. I could say a part of me feels like I've been having like an identity crisis. Because I've been for 4 years straight. I was doing this one thing, of course, my other stuff, but I was doing this thing for 4 years straight. And oh, me and my best friends were on FaceTime 2 nights ago, or it's probably yesterday. And we were talking about it. And I said, y'all, I started a new puzzle. No. They said, well, you got to find new things to, have interest in. And so they were talking about community things to have interest in. And so I said, I started a new puzzle and I showed them my puzzle and it was like, nah, we're talking about new things for you to have interest in getting into the community. And I said, what's so funny is I don't know how. I just don't know how. I don't know if it's because I don't have the interest. I don't know if it's because there's trauma attached to this community that from me and the community, I don't know how. And I know for me that I have been taking a step back from what I'm used to doing to transitioning into things that I, one, have experience with that I know needs a solution. For instance, if this was a different type of podcast dealing with politics, I most likely would not have said yeah. But because I recognize that we need healing in our politics and that's a discussion that needs to be had, absolutely I'm going to be here. So yeah, I'm still trying to figure this out, Skippy. I know that like where I live now, which is my grandmother's home, I'm already like, oh, we need a crosswalk here. I'm like, and then I'm also I'm on the board for the Friendship Community Gardens, which is I can walk to it. So I'm like, okay, I can still grow in my garden bed. I can be in community that way. And I'm trying to pace myself because I know that when I get back out there into the community, you know what that does. Oh, she's going to run for office again. What is she getting ready to do? And it's none of that. I just still want to have that self-fulfillment for service.
Such that you don't feel alone in this experience.
Yeah.
Since I lost my reelection, my response has been very similar. I had spent, over a decade prior to becoming a city council person, being highly invested and highly visible in my community in a number of different ways and roles. And I kind of disappeared for 6 months. Like I was there, but unless you were on a running trail or at my house for a dinner that my partner and I were cooking, you probably didn't see me. And on one side, I think I do have some emotional residue and emotional hangover of how much I invested in not just time, but my heart in the community, and felt like it wasn't aligned. And so wanting to prioritize putting my time into things that are equally as impactful, but are more likely to be successful. And so that's why we're on this podcast. That's why I'm a master coach now. Like I don't have to push rocks up hills. I just follow what people are asking for. And then I watch their service expand and their joy expand. And that feels really nice. But I am keeping myself out of community in a way that I know isn't forever. And I've actually already said to my partner this summer, this has to change because this is such a big part of me. But I had the same experience. And then selfishly, which I think I get to refill my cup a bit on community, I live in what is for me the most amazing place on earth. Like I love my town. It is remarkable for all of its challenges. I love it. And it became harder to see that while I was in office.
Yes.
Because, right? Did you feel that as well?
I had to leave just to go have fun.
Yeah. I mentioned anxiety is a thing that was like, that's my version of bipolar, right? And to this day, even though I'm well out of office, no one's going to, well, not no one, most people aren't going to bother me with political things now. The place that is most guaranteed, almost 100% hit rate to put me into an anxiety space, the grocery store. As soon as I show up at the grocery store, right? Because I remember what it used to be like to try to find groceries. And it's like, I'm going to be here for 3 hours. And I'm not going to just have random conversations. I'm going to be having conversations about everything that's wrong. And if I go out for a trail run in the most beautiful place in the world, if I'm getting my 5 miles in, I get stopped not for someone to do what they do today, which is go, God, isn't it so amazing here? Aren't we so lucky? And I'm like, yeah, we're so lucky. I feel so good. It was like, what the fuck are you doing about X? Why are you messing up Y? This is a problem here. Can you believe? And it's like, just to like every day only hear about the problems is really tough.
Yes. Listen, I knew this was the last time somebody had done it because the election happened like right after. A guy walked up to me we were at a celebration for All American Cities because we had just won All American Cities, and did not say hi. And then what I felt like, do you think you got ownership over me? Because what came out of their mouth was, you owe me some answers about that vote. What's up with that vote? What are you thinking? Just walked up on me like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, excuse you, learn how to speak first. And I knew I was like really past all the bull. And I'm kind of like, once again, things happen for a reason. Because I think this term would have looked a real different for me had, because you get so tired of it. I had to, like, I was very big on, I don't have to travel out of my district to really do anything. I grocery shop, get my nails done, hair done. All the fun is in my district.
Mm.
And when I found myself traveling all the way to Skybo Road just to get my nails done, I knew
Mm.
that, oh my gosh, and I don't want to say there's like too much access, because I actually loved when people had access to me, but there's a difference when they respect the access they have to you.
To your point earlier, it's also our responsibility to train people how to treat us. And
Absolutely.
no one tells us that when we're getting into office.
No one
There's no
tells
training on that.
that part. No one tells that. And so when I'm doing trainings, I'm telling people that give yourself access to people as much as you can handle, and also ensure that they respect that access. If you don't do anything on Sunday, don't do anything on Sunday. I
Yeah.
believe there's not anything in this world that somebody should blow your phone up about that much. And if it's that gonna happen like that, they should be calling 911.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll give a specific example. Early in my term, in my first couple of years, when I was leading from a less conscious and less informed place, I was the person crossing the street, nearly getting hit by a car because I was just buried in my phone 24 hours a day, responding to every email immediately because something in me said, this is my job, this is my responsibility. And that was super unhealthy for me. It didn't help my sleep. It didn't actually make me any better at responding to things. It just made me faster. It satiated maybe my ego's desire to tell people that I was responsive, but it wasn't super effective. In my second or third year, I switched to a batched email protocol in which I did a couple things. I set an away message that let people know. I think at the time it was 3 times a day. Now it's once a day. But hey, I only check my email 3 times a day. This allows me to be more present, focused, and aware of the person in front of me right now. And like that, maybe you one day. So I will get back to you within 24 hours. And if it's an emergency, you can call me. So I let people know what my boundaries were. I gave them a reason for those boundaries that actually serve them. I'll do what you need better when I can focus on it intently. And I gave them an out for an emergency. Now, I do think it is a right of a citizen to reach out at any time. That's what we are there for. But it's also our responsibility to set those boundaries. And I was very scared that I was going to get, a flamethrower to the face for that choice. And there were 5% of people who had something snarky to say about it. But 95% of people who had a comment were like, wow, that's really awesome. I wish I could do that. How did you set that up? And the other thing that I did is I used a tool called Inbox When Ready, which allowed me to go into my email to send an email so I could get workflow done, but without seeing the unread messages. So it hides them from you unless you click a button that says show inbox, which was revelatory for me because the way my brain is wired, if I see something undone, oh my God, I'm so stressed until it's done. And so not having to see that like removed all the stress for me. But it's just a specific example of how we can set our own boundaries and people have to adapt.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I did that. I did that in my second term, where
Mm.
because it was like, got it. I sent the away message. Hey, this is Shakeyla, I'll get back to you at this time. If it's an emergency, call these numbers. And I didn't have much, nothing negative came back from it. I did, experience the when I'm at dinner, especially in my downtown. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
excuse me. Do you know when this, or can you help me do this? I have a mouthful of shrimp right now. I can't. I'm sorry, but I can't. But those boundaries are major. I mean, you have elected officials that'll email through in the midnight,
Oh yeah.
through the wee hours of the
Easy.
morning. And don't let it be like somebody trying to be petty. And I would literally sit and have to text them and be like, y'all go to bed. Go to bed. Like, y'all are arguing about something. And what I thought was funny was the one person that would start the argument started it to create a public record. And then the person
Mm,
that will argue back and forth and not even realizing is really telling on themselves. So now you have a public record of you telling on
mm,
yourself. And so, but to allow it to have that level of control over you is insane. And while it's insane, yeah, it happens, but we got to recognize when to catch it and stop it from having that type of control over you. Because once it gets that type of control over you, you're just doing anything. And it
yeah.
begins to affect, once again, your ethics. It begins to affect how you treat people, how you respond to people. And then you forget the goal. You forget why you're
Yeah.
here. You forget who put you here.
So I want to start to move into applicable lessons learned, how these challenges became tools. Um, and I wonder if we started with this, which is Shakeyla today is going to write a very simple bullet point manual for Shakeyla on day one of office. Like, you're going to hand it to your past self the day she wins the election before she takes her seat. Do these X things that I've learned, and you are going to have a much more successful, enjoyable time in office. What does the table of contents for that guide say?
The first line item is going to be whoever's name that is. So for me, it's going to be my name, Shakeyla Ingram. And what that will mean for me is it'll take me through like who I am, because I think we all have to remember who we are when we start something,
Mm,
especially in politics. So I wanted to take me through who I am. Again, what are my triggers? How I operate. The next table of content is going to be boundaries. The next table of
mm,
content is going to be partnership. The next one would be safety. And when I say safety,
mm,
all things that encompass safety, like being safe. Who's your safe space? Who are the people you feel most safe with? You're like my kitchen cabinet, my kitchen table. Um, and then I think I would end it with a letter, like I end my book with a
mm,
letter. I get my letter writing from my great grandmother when I lived in Atlanta, and she got older. She wanted me to like let her write her more so she could stay hip to what was going on in the world. And so I would write a letter to express all of the things that I may experience, but to remember certain key things about who I am and what I need to do to see this through.
So, an opener with the reminder of who you are, the boundary setting around your time, emails, issues, the cultivation of safety, including who can I go to in times of challenge, and then a letter at the end with a longer form reminder of coming back to self. And then there's this piece of partnership. Can you just give us a little bit more on what that means?
Yeah, partnership. I think for me, I struggled with making partnerships. Um, and the partnerships that I did end up making were trauma based partnerships. They
Mm,
were, I was partner. I had partnerships with the three other Black women on council. We all were having the same experience. It was five women total, but it was an interesting dynamic. So we had four Black men, four Black women, one white man, one white woman, and me and those three other Black women, we came together, and I think we came together because of our lived experience and because of our makeup. And our
Mm.
other counterpart, I felt like she just wanted to be one of the boys. And so there was never any space for advocacy for us because she was playing the same game that they were playing. And
Mm.
um and so I wish I would have figured out how to have better, more meaningful partnerships with other council members. Um
Mm.
I knew all of their skills. I knew what they were good for. I knew what they probably lacked in. But I think at the end of it, I had partnerships where they mattered. I was able to get a
Mm.
full build out for a community because I had a great partnership with our senator.
How did you approach people differently that yielded that shift in result?
I think I was able to approach them in a more open and less aggressive way
Yeah.
because I knew we all had the same interest.
Yes.
We all had the same
Yeah.
interest. There was no, I'm going to do this on the back end. And it probably was, but when it came down to what I was trying to see through for this community, they were on board like I was on board.
I'd like to go through a few things that I pulled out from your book that I think might be instructive. These are kind of quick hitters of concepts that you've identified, created, or borrowed. I'm not sure. That might be helpful for others, but I think to frame it, it might be helpful. I've heard you talk about trauma, and I've heard you describe it, and correct me if I'm not getting this precisely right. I'm sure I'm not quoting it, but trauma are events that you don't choose, whereas healing are events that you do choose. Can you elaborate on that framework as a basis to moving into some of these concepts that you've created around healing?
When we set out to do something, for instance, like somebody's intention may have been good to do something or to help something, but it could have went so far left.
Mhm.
But I didn't mean to do that, right? I didn't choose for this to happen. That's where the idea
Mm.
came from that. For the instance where I got stood up on in a closed session, I was stating a fact. You had one council member that told another council member, hey, y'all not gonna like what's gonna happen tonight. Key indicator that y'all had a meeting before this. I'm tracking what's happening. I'm seeing the roles play out. I'm a very observant person. I really think y'all just had a meeting before this, and I really think we just need to go ahead and stop the theatrics.
Mm.
I didn't tell you to stand up and yell at me. You decided that on your
Mm.
own
Mm.
because what I said was a fact.
Mm.
However, though you did that, I'm going to choose to heal
Mm.
because what has happened to me, I don't want to live with on me. Though at that time I chose to live with it, and when I tell you it was war. Like I saw nothing but red after that. So for like
Mm.
6 months or so straight, I was like on everybody's ass. I was on everybody. There was an instance when a Black male on my board says, "You're out here being booty calls to so and so." We were in an argument at City Hall. And I was just so taken back. I was just like, wait a minute. I'm what? And I stopped him and I said, I don't talk about your personal life. I said, anybody that ever tries that with me, I shut it down because I'm not here for that. And of course, that goes against my ethics. Like, I wouldn't dare want somebody to do you like that. They denied it. But not only did they deny it, they went to their girlfriend at the time and told them that they actually said it, laughing and joking about it, and didn't think that I was going to find out. But at the same time, okay, that hurt. It truly hurt. But though I did not tell you to attack me in that regard, I'm going to choose to heal because I cannot handle being triggered that way, walking around thinking, "Oh my gosh, this entire city thinks I'm a booty call to who knows what." And I'm not even doing anything. I was so scared to date. I was so scared to date. And I hate to say it like this, Skippy, but I'm single, I'm smart, I'm beautiful, I got a shape on me, I got everything. You get what I'm saying? Like, so
confirmed. If you're in audio, confirmed. I can see.
So, I was scared to do anything because of the narrative that people will draw against you.
Yeah. In the recent Apolitical Foundation Mere Mortals report, how the well-being of elected officials is being impacted, I think it's some crazy statistic. It's like, and again, I may get this slightly wrong, but it's like 80% of female African-American elected leaders face sexual harassment.
Yes.
80%.
Yes. And didn't dawn on me what was happening to me. Did not dawn on me. I'm over here like, he really just called me that. And I was so numb. And so while all of these things are happening, but even though it has happened now and trauma is there now, I have to choose to heal. And one of the healing methods that I tried was I had a conversation with my therapist about it, and I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to call all three of them up, and I'm going to offer them to come sit and have coffee so that we can talk it out. Because when I go back into session, I don't want it to be a war. I don't want that. It was so heavy on me. But guess what? I didn't, in my mind, I was the victim here. I was the victim in my mind at the time. So I called the meeting, and two of them had the meeting together because it was the two that did yelling at me. And I said, this is how I feel. This is what I think. And this is what you did make me feel. One of them was like, this is just silly. This is just silly. And I can't believe what and also this is an older generation I'm talking about. So to really get them to say that they were wrong, good luck. And then one says he apologized, but he put it back on me. He said, I really think you have some unhealed trauma with relationships with men that you need to work out. But if I did make you feel some type of way, I do apologize. I was like, oh, okay. And then I was like, this is just silly. This is just silly. Just kept saying it. And when I said I'm a yeller, they recalled one instance where I was yelling and cussing about an issue. These are pastors now. So they took it as I was yelling and cussing at them. And so I took the opportunity to say, you know what? I'm sorry that you felt that way. That was never directed at you. And I gave them an example of when they should know it's directed at them.
So what I'm hearing is that the lack of choice in the experience, in a big experience, in a confronting experience, when things don't go as intended and cause harm, that's trauma. But the reverse of that is choosing to, even in the face of that challenge, of that initial feeling of victimization, which it sounds like you no longer view yourself as the victim in that. Is that true?
It still happened to me. So yeah, I am. But I do have an understanding of how everyone's role can play a part.
And so from that place, there was a period of time where you said you were really at them, right? So you're responding from that triggered place. But then there's a later time where you're able to step back and observe it, to see the bigger picture, to see the part that you played in it intentionally or unintentionally. And from that place of empowerment, then you can choose. And from that choice, healing happens. Is
Yes.
that accurate?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I want to read a quote that I pulled up from Desmond Tutu. So if anyone's not familiar with Desmond, was part of the Peace and Reclamation Commission in South Africa following the fall of the apartheid regime, where they brought people together, people who had subjugated, hurt others, and then those who were the recipient of those actions. And it's a quote about forgiveness or understanding, but I think it applies here, which is forgiveness does not relieve someone of responsibility for what they've done. Forgiveness does not erase accountability. It is not about turning a blind eye or even turning the other cheek. It is not about letting someone off the hook or saying it's okay to do something monstrous. Forgiveness is simply about understanding that every one of us is both inherently good and inherently flawed.
Mm-hmm.
Within every hopeless situation and every seemingly hopeless person lies the possibility of transformation.
Yeah.
And to me, that summarizes in so much what you went through. And then I've got two other quotes I've pulled here.
Mm-hmm.
One from a woman you worked with, who some people may have heard of. Her name's Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah.
And the quote is, "Forgiveness is giving up on the hope that the past could have been any different." And then lastly, from Nelson Mandela, which I think is ultimately why we choose to forgive: "Resentment is like drinking poison and hoping it will kill your enemies."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so what I hear is like, yeah, there's plenty of fault to go around, but I'm going to take the choice to do what I can do to free myself from
Absolutely.
having to live with that experience.
Absolutely.
So good. So good. All right. Few quick hitters, things you've identified that are quotable. And I would love for you to explain what these are and anything else you want to share about them in brief. But this idea of intentionality, what is that? What does that mean? How do you practice it?
Yeah, intentionality is seeing something, knowing that that is what you want for yourself, and making very, very direct actions or steps to see your way to that.
And goal friends. What is a goal
Yes,
friend?
goal friends. Man, goal friends is making sure that we see each other. I mean, and truly see each other. I think because, within our generation, we're profession driven. We're goal oriented. We're doing all of the things I think our grandparents and our ancestors would want us to do. So, goal friends is ensuring that we see our friends, and we're showing up for our friends in whatever their goals are.
One last broad question, and then we'll start to land this plane. But one of the areas where you and I do have significant distinction in our environment is I'm fortunate now to live in a place that, people have their basic needs met, right? It's an affluent community. And so people have plenty of time to, not everyone, not all the time. I mean, it's the adage where I live is you either have 3 homes or 3 jobs, and that's true. But even in the 3-job world, we have time to get outside, to be active, to move our bodies. And in other communities such as yourself, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, that's not available to a lot of folks. Like, you are really working all day every day in high stress jobs. You're not working from your computer. You're in it. And it's so hard to find healing when you're in it, right?
Yeah.
And so I wonder if you would A, agree with that assessment, and then B, for not just leaders in communities like that, but just humans who
Yeah.
can't or don't have the haven't yet found the ability to extricate themselves from those, that in moment to find healing, like what advice would you have for how to heal in that environment?
So, healing in the environment you got sick in is a struggle.
Mm,
You will find yourself pulling back from people, from things that you are used to doing, which is completely okay because you got to do whatever you got to do to save you. And I'll say this again, you got to do whatever you have to do to save you. For me, the first time I went through my severe depression where I was like living in Atlanta, I did not stay in that environment. It was a part of why I was becoming sick. I had a supervisor to tell me, well, if you want to keep a job, you will tell your family that you'll come on such and such date. And in my
mm,
brain, I was just like, you got me fucked up. Like,
mm,
My grandmother had already been in the hospital twice in that week. And that started my down spiral because I could not be there for my grandmother. So you already know that that was like heavy on me. July came around, my therapist put me on medical leave June 30th. I got home July 1st. My grandmother passed away July 21st.
mm,
And so I never went back. I stayed home. I stayed here in Fayetteville. So that I did not heal in the environment that I got sick in. But when I was on council, I had no other choice. I still had a term to serve. I literally had to pull back. I became medicated, still had to show up. And I couldn't show up and was crying all the time. And so I pulled back just to maintain like the balance of my mental health. But my healing journey was it was very intimate. It had
mm.
to be intimate as an elected official. It had to be.
Yeah, what I'm hearing in that as someone who's been through a 12-step program, it's like the number one thing is change your environment. And that doesn't mean you got to go on a trip to Hawaii or move, but it does mean you don't go back to the bar, or you don't hang out with the same drinking friends. And so finding even small ways to shift your physical space, your community, can open a portal to different ways of thinking and healing. Final question, same question to everyone on the show, which is a recognition that our audience are not passive observers. These are the humans in the arena. They're on the council tables, they're the citizens speaking up at meetings, they're asking for that crosswalk, whatever it may be, educating the children, giving out the presents. And so knowing that, if you could leave them with only one thing, one quote, one thought, one idea that would best resource them to be a vector for healing our politics, what would it be?
Yeah, so I want to consult my book. It's Simple Reminder number 11, and I'm going to paraphrase
Mm,
it, right? I don't care how others may not like how you show up or how you lead. The journey of leadership and being authentic and being intentional is going to be tough and it's going to be hard.
mm.
But you must show up. You must show up regardless. You must lead. You must still choose to be intentional.
Amen. Amen, sister. Where can people find you? Where can they work with you? Where can they follow you? How do we find Shakeyla?
Okay, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at Shakeyla Ingram. And then I have my website is ShakeylaIngram.com. And
Mm,
then the book is intentionallyhere.com. But
beautiful.
both can be accessed from each.
Beautiful. Thank you so
Thank
much for your
you.
time today, for your continued leadership, for your bravery and willingness to learn from every experience to serve others. I so appreciate you.
I appreciate you too, Skippy. Thank you so much for this. I mean, this is just a beautiful podcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you want to put what you've heard here today into practice, sign up for our newsletter, The Leader's Handbook, where each month you'll receive just one email with a curated selection of the most useful tools and practices discussed on this podcast today and over the course of the last month, delivered in simple how-to worksheets, videos, and audio guides, so you and your teams can try and test these out in your own life and see what best serves you. And lastly, if you want to be a vector for healing our politics, if you want to do your part, take out your phone right now and share this podcast with 5 colleagues you care about. Send a simple text, drop a line, and leave the ball in their court. Because the truth is, the more those around you do their work, the better it will show up in your life, in your community, and in your world. Have a beautiful day. The Healing Our Politics podcast is brought to you by the Elected Leaders Collective, the first leading and most highly recognized name in mental health, well-being, and performance coaching for elected leaders and public servants, designed specifically for you. Now, don't be fooled by the name. The Elected Leaders Collective is not just for elected leaders. It is for all public servants, staffers, volunteers, government, nonprofit, whole organizations. This is for you. If you are filled with passion for improving your community and world, but are tired, as I am, of the anger, stress, and vitriol, if you find yourself banging your head against that same wall, struggling with the incoming criticism and threats, arguing with colleagues who are supposed to be on your team, and questioning if it's even worth it anymore, then the Elected Leaders Collective programming is specifically for you. With the Elected Leaders Collective, you will learn to become a hashtag political healer, building the authentic, unshakable confidence and courage to stay true to yourself through the anger and pressure, while cultivating the open, empathetic mind to meet others with the curiosity, compassion, and kindness necessary to respond to threats, improve challenging relationships, de-escalate conflict, and bring people in your community together to solve real problems and get shit done. You'll reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm and become a more effective leader while having time for your family, yourself, your health, and your wealth, sleeping well at night, and showing others they can too. Now that's leadership. Healing Our Politics listeners receive 10% off all Elected Leaders Collective services using the code hashtag political healer. Use it today and become one of the brave political leaders healing our politics. Use code hashtag political healer by going to www.electedleaderscollective.com and starting today. That's www.electedleaderscollective.com and starting today.